Hello and welcome to The Power Curve. I'm Holly Scott and I am here with my guest Lisa Wipperman Heine, accomplished executive in the world of medtech and current CEO of Precardia. Great to have you here, Lisa. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Holly. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled to have you. Lisa sits on the board of two public medtech companies as well as a nonprofit, the Resiliency Project Foundation. She started her career early with a customer focus, sales, moving into clinical, regulatory, reimbursement. She was the VP of Clinical Affairs with EV3 when it was acquired by Covidien, where she served at the time as the Global VP of Medical Affairs, and now is leading her second startup at the C-level. With more guest lecturing engagements and publications than I can mention, it is fair to say you have created and are living your power curve, Lisa. And thanks for being here. Want to jump right in, if that's okay. We go way back. We've known each other for, probably as long as I've been in the business, almost 20 years in various capacities. Lisa is quite a unicorn with her progression, and that's why she was top of mind when I knew we were going to have a podcast centered around career development and interesting pivotal points. So Lisa, perhaps you could start by sharing with us a bit about your early career decision to get into medtech. Was that actually a deliberate decision? What were you thinking back then? Perhaps how did you get your first break, so to speak?
That's a great question, Holly. And I think there's some folks who they know exactly what they want to do. And, for me, I think I fell a little bit into med tech. It's not something I knew existed. I've always had, in high school, college, always had an interest in science and medicine and healthcare. And, the traditional path is a lot of folks go and maybe think about a career in medicine, whether it's nursing or, physician care. I ended up going to grad school. And in the course of grad school, I worked on my graduate research with an orthopedic surgeon. And he suggested a project, and the project involved a medical device. So I essentially did all the research work related to that medical device. And I enjoyed the concept of research. I love the concept of, how do you leverage the medical technology to enhance patient care. So it was actually, that was my first entry into, what is medical devices and what's med tech. So that I kind of got into that. And then on the research side, I really was interested in research. So looking for things that involved research. And so that was, I think, my early touch on this could be an interesting space to leverage my interest in healthcare and medicine.
No, it's very interesting. And I noticed that you started in a customer-focused spot early on. So you had an interest in research, so it pulled you into the med tech world. How did you, was that the opportunity available at the time, or was that something that you were strategic about when it comes to getting into customer service and then jumping into sales?
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, I think at that point in time, where the economy was and job opportunities, I was looking for a way in to med tech, and it seemed like a great way to get my foot in the door. And quite frankly, what an exceptional way to cut your teeth, so to speak, in med tech, because you're in front of the customer. You start to learn the needs they have for their patients. And so I thought it was a really good way, and it was incredibly hard work. And really, like I said, just going in with the customer on a day-to-day basis. And I think to be successful at it, I had to ask a lot of questions. I had to listen. You have to really listen to understand what are their unmet needs for treating their patients, and really leverage that to serve them and their patients. And I think that was a really good, jumping off point for me and a good foundation for no matter what I was going to do in healthcare.
Mm-hmm. No, was it a natural move for you as someone who's coming from an interest in science and research that you shared, that was your passion? Typically, that personality is not as comfortable in that customer-facing role. Did you find yourself pushing were you pushing yourself out of the comfort zone, or did someone mentor you or suggest that you went that route? I'm curious.
No, it was, I'd say yes and no. I think it pushed me out of my comfort zones in some ways, because you know, there are times you're out there and listening and understanding, you still have to ask for the sale, right? I think you're still there to support a business, and you know, it's up to me to develop, you know, the talking points and understanding of why it brings value to them and understand their business. But so I think that part of it of just, you know, asking for it is a comfortably uncomfortable, I guess I'd say. But I was an extrovert, so especially when I was younger. So I loved going out and meeting new people and hearing about what they were working on and understanding, you know, what their patient care model was. So it wasn't from that perspective. Plus, I did a lot of work, even in our technology, because it was a small, you know, distributor of, you know, durable medical equipment. I did a lot of my own research to understand how does this fit in, and so that it still fueled my, you know, desire to understand. So I think it was good that way as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting foundation. I hear often, both from a hiring perspective, where someone will say, you know, I really want somebody who has that early experience carrying a bag, and I also hear from individuals like you, the comments along the lines of, I'm glad I had that experience carrying a bag. I'm glad I had that customer-facing experience. Now you're an accomplished C-suite executive. Do you see that as an important component of your foundation as well as others that you might mentor along their career?
100%. I mean, I think the more we know, the more we learn in life, the more we realize we don't know. And so I think any experiences that help give you perspective and understand what other people in your organization might be going through, what are the key, you know, perspectives, because that diversity of perspective is critically important to our decisions that we make. So I think awareness and empathy and understanding, I think just adds to our ability to build a good team and actually drive success. So I wouldn't change a thing. I think it was incredibly hard. I worked very hard at it, and, you know, to your point, some of that discomfort and just getting perspective makes me appreciate and value people who do carry the bag and really understand the challenges that they face and be able to have a good conversation with them and build trust when we're trying to work together.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that empathy and trust, and that is there's no substitute for that. If you have that experience and you can then lead others that are coming up in that experience and understanding their swing from being comfortable and uncomfortable, and they're going from what's natural to them to what may not be natural, but you know it's a growth curve for them, and it's something that will add to their long-term plan. That perspective is incredibly valuable. That's really interesting. When you transitioned in at the time, I believe it was, where did you get your first clinical regulatory opportunity? Which organization?
It was a company called EMPI.
Okay, that's right.
Durable
The
medical,
EMPI group.
so chronic pain, and they were in the urogynecology space. So a lot of interesting and some a little bit of serving the physical therapist. So, you know, the fact that I worked with an orthopedic surgeon in grad school and had that understanding of some of those aspects, it fit in well. So, but interestingly enough, I applied for a job there the first time for the same role, and I didn't even get an interview. 1 year later, I applied again, and I was the only person they interviewed and got the job. So, you know, things happen for a reason and dynamics. And one thing I did the second time was I had a friend of a friend who worked there, and I said, just get my resume to the right person and I'll do the rest. And so I think one, you know, takeaway pearl for anybody out there who's, especially now in this time of, you know, job challenges and things, always, you know, leverage those connections, because people are more than willing to help you. And even if it's just, you still have to sell yourself, but if it's helping you open a door so that you can, you know, don't be afraid to ask. because I think that's too often. Oh, we don't want to bother them, or I know my kids' generation. It's like, oh, I don't know if I want to ask. People are more than willing to help you because we were helped. That's how we got where we are. Those doors were open. So I think that's always important.
That's right. Yeah, giving someone the opportunity to help you, and having the confidence to ask and put yourself
Correct.
out there. And it doesn't. The mode of communication has changed dramatically over the decades that we've been in the business. We can talk about how our job search has changed and how our kids' job search will be different. The mode, though, of someone giving someone a chance hasn't changed. That dynamic has not changed. And frankly, it's become more clear now because there are so many other mediums that you can communicate. There are so many digital ways. There you can call, you can text, you can email. The voice of someone who's going to advocate for you, though, can always get the attention, at least. Doesn't mean you'll get the job, but it does get the attention in a different way. And that's what I encourage people to do, is try to think outside of what everyone else is doing. If everyone else is applying, if everyone else is swimming down this road, think creatively. Is that going to get the hiring manager's attention? No. So that was smart. So you leveraged your network at the time, and you were younger in career, so your network was probably a fraction of what it is now. You still had the opportunity to get someone involved for you.
Well, and I think it's truly a dichotomy of what I did just shooting my resume in the first time and what I did the second time, and with basically the same experience, and what a difference that makes. So again, I think just encouraging people I think your point is well taken. Think outside the box. Understand that you may be competing with hundreds or more people. And what's going to get your attention, even people who send out just anonymous emails with their resume attached to hundreds of companies. How many of those are actually going to open it and you're going to hit on something, unless somebody else maybe picks up the phone and says, hey, I hear so-and-so just sent his resume over. Let me tell you a little bit about him. It's worth talking to him. It's hard for someone to say no to that. Or
That's right.
And I think then you're putting the ball in the court of the person applying for the job to help you understand their experience, because the resume is just a piece of paper, and it really comes down. My daughter just got a job, and she said, I think they were interviewing for personality. And so how do you get past that flat piece of paper so that they can understand, how do you fit in this organization? How do you fit the culture? How are you going to work with the team? And I think that's so important. And it's even more challenging now with the pandemic of we're all working a lot remotely. It's not the same thing. You're not necessarily all in the office. That really does change the dynamics a little bit.
Oh, it definitely does. I know one thing that I'm emphasizing a lot more than ever is the old-fashioned phone call. With the pandemic and video conferencing capabilities and email and people going virtual, there's something to be said about a nuanced phone call. When you don't have the visual cues, when you don't have digital representation, when you don't have black and white words in front of you, listening is your listening skills are at its peak, and you're able to exchange and get to know individuals in a different way. So I'll actually encourage some of my clients to not do everything via Zoom if they're interviewing. Phone calls, sometimes putting that in there, because you do catch different things. Yeah.
No, it's a great point. I think a lot of us are getting Zoom fatigue, right? So I think that's a great piece of advice.
Yeah, it gives you a different level of representation. If you're accustomed to doing a call and then an in-person interview, and now we're skipping a call and going right to Zoom, there's certain pieces that we may be missing, and sacrificing that. So we need to step back and just think about things and give ourselves a check to make sure that we're giving the opportunity, right? And to the individuals who are reaching out and looking for something different. And, and this is, we've talked about this a couple times, and again, coming back to one of the main reasons I thought of you right away on this is your background and your foundation from customer support, research, to clinical regulatory reimbursement, having all of those experiences, it appears from the outside that you had someone say, do X, Y, Z, and do all of these things, and you will be a remarkable C-level executive because you will be able to see all these different pieces. But I don't believe that to be true. So how did that happen? How did that happen? Here you are in customer support and operations and clinical. You have this love and passion for research, and then you get a chance in a ClinOps or ClinReg role without the experience, right? So how did that happen besides just sheer luck? Was there something, was there thought behind that? Was there a mentor that said this would be a great path for you?
You know, I don't know that there was a, you know, check the box, first I'll do this, then I'll do this. I think a lot of it, and again, this goes to, you know, anybody looking for work, it's sometimes you create, I think it's a combination of being in the right place at the right time, an opportunity, and willingness to step outside your comfort zone and your box to say, I'll take that extra job, thank you. And I think I always had a curiosity about things and wanting to learn more. And you know, you start pulling a thread in one function, you start to understand how another piece of this plays in. Because you know, if you step back and look at the overall business, I always wanted to know how my piece fit in and what did that mean to the greater good. And I think each of these building blocks, it was, well, that seems like a great opportunity. And sometimes it just, you know, fell in my lap. I had somebody, you know, after my first job, gave me, you know, an early mentor, said, I want to have you take this on too, take regulatory on too, and was excellent at supporting me and helping me grow that. And I had another opportunity where somebody said, here's a panel track, you know, class 3 device. Would you be willing to just take regulatory and health economics and reimbursement and not clinical? And I'm like, well, who wouldn't want to do that? And then I think the key thing is sticking with it. Because I think often we're like, oh, okay, then I'm going to jump here, then I'm going to jump here, and I need to get here in a certain time. I don't think you can put a timetable on it. I just embraced and enjoyed the opportunity and didn't really worry too much about how I was going to get to the next step. I wanted to enjoy what I was doing and have a passion for going to work every day. And that, for me, drove me. And the rest will come. So there was definitely not a roadmap. And in terms of mentors, you know, multiple mentors every step of the way. And some I would call opportunistic mentors, you know, where you're asking questions and they step in. And then there's ones I think that are at pivotal points in your development that they may not even know they're a mentor, but they say something profound that sticks with you, that, you know, really it becomes a guiding light for you. And, you know, I can think of multiple occasions in my life, you know, whether it was in college or early in my career or my first executive job. And sometimes it involved tough love, you know, people who are willing to speak truth to you and really help you grow. But you also have to be willing to accept that and learn from it.
Wow. Well, there's been so many experiences, and again, I'm fortunate to have known you through so many of them, where I've stepped back and paused and said, "Wow, the grace of which you've handled some really challenging situations is tremendous." Was there anything that you can think of that you would consider a tipping point in your career, something where things were going one direction and something happened and it really accelerated an opportunity, or perhaps it was not a positive outcome, but you learned a hell of a lot? I'm just curious if there was anything that you think back on and say, wow, that was that badge from that gain from that time has helped me to become where I am now.
I think, interestingly enough, I think there's a lot of those where, you know, some of it is, I think, perseverance of when you're in a tough situation, trying to see it through And that happens more often than not. And so I think that learning that resilience, so that happened multiple times in my career. And again, that goes back to mentors and people. I remember I think Joe one time told me, "Don't leave this job. You will want to stick through this." So I mean, I've heard it from multiple people in my career, yourself included. We've had conversations, and I think you have people who provide that foundation. In terms of just really aha moments, I'd have to say, from a MedTech perspective, what gives me passion and gets me out of bed every day is a couple points in my career where, I always knew MedTech was, quote unquote, helping people, right? We're doing something that hopefully at the end of the day makes somebody's life better or potentially saves their life. But there's a little bit of abstraction in it when you're, in a cubicle or you're in an office. And I think early in my career, probably, close to 20 years ago now, I recall going out on a clinical visit and hearing a story about one of the patients that we treated, and you hear their patient history. And I remember it was when I was in heart failure early in my career, and it was a postpartum mother who had heart failure. And just an incredible story of, her husband literally giving her CPR on more than one occasion to bring her back. And you think about 39 years old or 40 years old, and you think about that, and all of a sudden it puts a face on what we do matters. And so let's do it right, and let's do it well, and let's not screw it up, and let's create that opportunity. Let's make sure we have a safe device. Let's make sure we do everything to get it into the hands of physicians who need it. And so I think that that was kind of one inflection point. And I remember a little bit later on working in the stroke space, a similar type story when we worked really, really hard. The team worked really, really hard to get a product launched. And I think about the stories of the first weekend that it was available and what it meant to some patients. And so I think, I always have to remind myself of that, to put myself back in that spot of, this is why I do this every day. And I think when you do that, that's your seminal moment or your pivot point, for me at least, that keeps me grounded and reminds me what the purpose and the goal is. Why am I doing this?
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting here just, again, so thrilled that I consider you not only a respected industry peer, but a friend, because the fact that you have accomplished so much and you have done so many interesting and phenomenal things from a business perspective, and then when asked about that, you bring it back to the patient, that gives me chills. That's what it's all about. The reality is these products do make a difference. They save lives, they make a difference. And you've spent so much time in cardiology. I definitely want to circle back to that. I do want to comment though, because I know your career has been incredibly robust. There was a period when you were traveling much more than you were home. You had a beautiful family, and you've always been incredibly driven. And Joe and I have said many times over the years that, the number one career decision you could make is with whom you choose to spend your life. Just curious if you could comment on that, especially for those younger in their career, and they're thinking with big ambitious plans, and they're perhaps young and also in a relationship. How do you set that table for success for a household that, when love ebbs and flows, and when travel is excessive, and you come home completely depleted? Any words of wisdom from someone who's lived this and been successful, had a wonderful relationship for so many years?
That's a great and I think important question for many of us who, there's a concept of work-life balance. I'm not sure, I think that's different for everybody of what that is, but I think success is about the team. And for me, the team starts at home. And first of all, when I hire people, I used to always, when I interviewed, I'd say, don't check your personality at the door, because who you are is what shapes how you contribute to this team. And for me, that checking the door is bringing my whole self. And I, my husband, my children, I think they are the foundation of what drives that passion of patient care. And I think their support, I wouldn't be where I am today, absolutely 100% without my partner in crime, my husband, who truly, it is our success. And, every time, when we're treating patients or going along, he asks the same questions and is a cheerleader and is very, very much in touch with what we're doing and very supportive. So I think everybody's life may be defined slightly differently. What we define as our family, what's important to us outside of work. And so I think I'd even genericize that a little bit of what's important to you personally. Don't lose that to the job, because I think it's intertwined. And just make sure it gets its time and attention too, because I think that refuels you, whether it's even a phone call, debrief at the end of the day when you are traveling a lot. It refuels my passion and my energy for doing the job, because that's my important thing. So I couldn't do it without my family.
Yeah, I'm having that fulfilling it. You have your personal fulfillment, and having that support only accelerates that, and then to plug back into that family and to have those connection points is just so critical. Yeah, no, that's truly special.
Well, and being there for what's important to them, and how do you make that happen? So I think obviously, our work is at times very demanding, and so it's figuring it out. And there's always a way to figure it out. And those rare times it's not, then it's, how do you work out to cover things? So I think it's always doable. You just have to figure it out.
Yeah. No, I'll say to my boys, they're still young and still at an age where it's like, oh, Mom, why are you still doing this? Or why are you working? Or why are you going there? I'd rather you do. And I'll say, you know what? I love what I do, and I want you boys to grow up and eventually love what you do. And to me, I do have to do things, and it may take some time away from you, but to me, it makes it more valuable when we do have the time that we have together. It's more. So I try and position it as positively as possible, because I see some people who try to constantly play this shuffle game. It's like, oh, well, I'll do this for you. Just give me this hour. And it's always a trade-off. And if your life is always a trade-off, it becomes incredibly exhausting, right? And you're not pleasing anyone. So I think that having those conversations early and having them often about what drives you and what fulfills you and what you define life to look like is really important, because it only gets more complicated once we throw family and everything else, right?
Well, I remember at a point I was thinking about taking a job, and it was when my youngest daughter was probably, I think she must have been in middle school. And I recall we sat down and had a negotiation, because I said, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Here's what it would take. This is what it would mean. How do you feel about it? And I actually, I captured it on video, and I still have it to this day. And, we have to do this, and, these are my terms. And the best part was at the very end, and she said, and I want a trampoline. And I'm like, how does that play into this? Ironically, we said no to the trampoline, and eventually she saved up her own money, bought it, put it together, and I think as a college student now is going to try to sell it on her own, or a little entrepreneur. So there you go. Yeah.
She's been listening to your negotiation conference calls too much. She threw in that trampoline last minute. Wow. Well, getting back to the cardiovascular piece, because I know that that's a passion of yours. Most of your career is centered around cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
What can you share with us the impact of your current opportunity? Obviously, heart failure is a multi-billion-dollar market. I think it's expected to be 10 billion plus over the next several years. Anything that you could comment on here to tell us what you're excited about?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you think about heart failure in general, I mean, it's a profoundly challenging disease. And as much as we've come forward with technologies, especially with acute decompensated heart failure, the current approaches, the medications. You still have a lot of patients who aren't responsive to those medications. And, I can tell you these patients feel terrible, and it's just so challenging for them. And, I think what attracted me to this technology is it was really kind of a disruptive concept to what the standard of care is for acute decompensated heart failure, a kind of frontline, even forward compatible type cardiac catheter-based device. It's not a permanent implant, and for those patients that aren't responsive to the current therapies or are slow to respond, it's something that could really be a game changer for them in terms of getting them more rapidly unloaded, because it's really what they call a cardiorenal unloading device, because these patients are incredibly volume overloaded. Mm-hmm. And so, think about that. You feel awful, just awful. Sure. And, seeing and hearing about some of the initial patient experiences, it almost makes you choke up. I remember a patient who was just, so miserable, and telling his daughter, I don't want to do this anymore. And within hours, just how much better they're feeling. So if we can make that impact, and, to your point, this is, we have, I think, something like 1.8 or almost 2 million, hospital admissions a year. And when you think about over the age of 65, it's one of the leading causes of hospitalization. So, and think about the costs that are associated with that. So not only can we potentially make these patients feel better with something that, hopefully is safe, that has a very, like I said, safety margin, straight catheter procedure, but you also potentially can get them out of the hospital sooner, and hopefully maybe they won't come back as often. So if we can do that, it's a game changer. And so, so far, the early work we've done has been very promising, and I'm just excited about what we potentially have here. And we're just working really hard to keep it moving forward. This is something that came out of an incubator, out of MD Start, which is an incubator in France. And, like I said, when they approached me, it just is something that seems like it could really, really be a game changer. So we're working really hard to do that. We're in early clinical trials, and I'm very hopeful that this is something that will really have an impact.
It's exciting, and anything you are involved with, I'm excited about anyway, because I know that you're right in the middle of it, and you bring on such a tremendous A-team. So yeah, but this is great. Heart failure is without question a market of patients that are underserved, and if we can get something in there to help them and help them feel better quality of life, my goodness, yeah. We'll be watching it. That's excellent. Well, I know we're limited on time. One last question though, as you have maneuvered through small companies, larger organizations, and now in C-suite, smaller companies, any advice to those who aspire to a career path like you in terms of time in large corporate and lessons perhaps learned there versus the startup?
I think general advice is, I think a lot of times when we want to take over the world, we want to walk into a room and you want to make changes. We want to impact things. And I think sometimes too, it's important to listen to those who've been there before you. So whether it's a small company or a large company, asking empowering questions, listening, a willingness, whether it's small or large, to roll up your sleeves and maybe take on something extra or look for those extra opportunities. And, I think don't ever lose your integrity or authenticity. I think those are critical. And always remember why you're there. And, does it resonate? Do you feel good about coming there every day? And I think the rest will happen, don't overthink small company, large company, because I think they both present tremendous opportunities for learning. And, the right fit at the right time. I think just make sure you're asking the right questions, so you go in there with your eyes wide open. Because I think sometimes we have a feeling a new job is, and I'm sure you deal with this with your clients, that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. And there's, challenging and wonderful things that come with every job. and it's a package deal. And so I think you have to embrace the challenge as much as the thing that excites you, because that's part of the journey. And so, I do think some of it may be tied to what how you're wired, right? I mean, early stage companies, boy, there's something about rolling up your sleeves and you're digging in, and then all of a sudden you flip the switch and you're having a strategic discussion. So it requires, you to pick up your own mail, learn how to, use every software tool available, which my team will tell you I'm still not very good at that. But I think both have tremendous opportunities. Just go in with your eyes wide open and make sure you're asking a lot of questions of the people build your network with people who can help you, that you can learn from, and who potentially can learn from you at some point in time. And just always remain humble and grounded.
Excellent advice. Lisa, thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it. So you're terrific, and I know that there's a number of nuggets in this that people will gain some real insight from. So thanks for being with us.
Holly, thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on The Power Curve.